2 summers ago, I took a class from Wesley Theological Seminary called Spirituality in Nature, taught by Dr. Beth Norcross. And on the first day of class, about a dozen students gathered in a basement classroom with no windows. That wasn't going to work for us, so we took class outside. Once we got outside and we gathered around Dr. Norcross, she clapped her hands together and grinned and said, "Now, I want you to meet your neighbors." And we assumed this meant introducing ourselves to each other, but no, she turned and walked briskly toward a tall tree with patchy bark and giant leaves. "Does anyone know this one's name?" she called out. And we stared blankly back at her for a moment. "Is it a sycamore?" a seminary student from Texas asked. "Yes, excellent. Now, let's meet more of your neighbors." She waved us on, and we followed her to our next neighbor. And we met many of the same trees and plants on the Wesley campus that you all seem to have here at River Road. You have an oak and a beech, a tulip poplar, ash, redbud, dogwood, Japanese maple, fringe trees, black locust, rose of Sharon. We made notes in our journals, and some of us tried to become amateur artists, trying to sketch out the general shape of the leaves or other interesting aspects of the trees so we could try and identify them later when we met them again. It was a revolutionary thought for many of us to begin thinking about creation around us as our neighbors. Josh Whitten, the founder of the Make Soil movement, an online platform, explains that over 10 years ago, he decided to create a compost bin. He found 2 slats and some chicken wire and made one, but not in his isolated backyard. He made it in full view of his apartment complex. And then he went around and he knocked on doors. He said, "Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a single guy, and I don't have enough food scraps to make this compost bin a real thing, but I heard this wild idea that you can turn your food waste into soil. And I've never seen it, to be honest, but the internet says so. So I was wondering if you would like to contribute your food scraps to our community compost." And people said, "You mean you want my garbage?" "Yes, bring everything and let's see how far this can go." Within a few weeks, more than a dozen people were making small contributions, and over the next few months, all that food waste, the coffee grounds, the food scraps, it all turned into this beautiful black soil. It was incredible. Whitten explains that making soil helps us to complete a feedback loop in our brains, to actually see the outcome of our actions changing before our eyes, our food waste turning into regenerative, healthy, nourishing soil that will in turn grow healthy, nourishing plants, which remove the carbon from our air, help us create oxygen to breathe in addition to feeding us. At the current rate of topsoil degradation, the UN says we have about 60 years left of farming. We're demanding too much of our topsoil, but this doesn't need to be left to farmers to deal with, he says. When people make soil together, the next idea that comes up is to plant something. Millions of people growing their own food creates a resilient food system. Making soil together is a beautiful way to build community. There aren't many things we come together to do today that actually regenerate the planet. He writes that when we touch this living soil, it's full of microbes that communicate to our skin and then to our brain, that the planet itself is alive. And we go from feeling lonely and despairing to feeling that we are immersed in this living system. It seems that together is the best way to move forward and save this planet. Together in community, responding to human needs and creation's needs. But we cannot all respond in the same way with the same methods, because we exist in a broken system on a broken planet, and we have lots of limitations to deal with. A study on race and toxic waste in the United States resulted in a report that found that among the variety of indicators, race was the best predictor of the location of hazardous waste facilities in the U.S. 40% of the nation's commercial hazardous waste landfill capacity was in 3 predominantly African American and Hispanic communities. The largest landfill in the nation is found in Sumter County, Alabama, where nearly 70% of its 17,000 residents are Black and 96% are poor. It's a dumping ground. Professor James Cone, known as the founder of Black liberation theology, writes in his article entitled, "Whose Earth Is It Anyway?" The fight for justice cannot be segregated, but must be integrated with the fight for life in all its forms. Dr. Cone challenges us not to simply see creation historically, but to fight for justice holistically. We desperately need each other in the struggle for justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. Martin Luther King Jr.'s idea of the beloved community is a potent symbol for people struggling to build one world community where life in all its forms is respected. All life is interrelated, King said. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. There's an interrelated structure of reality. And as Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon King's wisdom and we echo that powerful message in our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And Dr. Cone asks us, whose problems define the priorities of the environmental movement? Whose suffering claims its attention? Do environmentalists care about poor people? Now that humanity has reached the possibility of extinction, he writes, one would think that a critical assessment of how we got where we are would be the next step for sensitive and caring theologians of the earth. If we save the planet and have a society of inequality, we wouldn't have saved much. The earth is not a machine. It's an organism in which all things are a part of one another. And Dr. Cone urges us to deepen our conversation by linking the Earth's crisis with the crisis in the human family. If it is important to save the habitats of birds and other species, then it is at least equally important to save Black lives in the ghettos and prisons of America. Are y'all walking with me? Representative John Lewis of Georgia has been involved in and leading civil rights work for more than 60 years. Some of you know his resume well, which is quite lengthy and shows a lifelong dedication to civil rights work. Representative Lewis himself says that working for clean air, clean water is just as important, if not more important, than anything I have ever worked on, including civil rights. American novelist Alice Walker writes, "It's not so much a question of whether the lion will lay down with the lamb, but whether human beings will ever be able to lie down with any creature or being at all." Creation is not just the gentle meadow near water where the poet Wendell Berry lies his weary head. Creation is not only the delicious backdrop of a Mary Oliver poem. Creation is a living organism that breathes and speaks and grows and dies and changes. But most of all, creation actively calls us to follow the living pulse, to respond to the cries of creation with life-giving, creative energy, not despair. In 2002, Alfredo Moser in Brazil realized that a plastic bottle could be reused, filled with water and just a few drops of bleach. When you install this filled bottle into a tin roof, the sunlight coming through refracts and lights up that bottle like a light bulb. It produces similar brightness to a 40 to 60 watt incandescent bulb during the hours of daylight and uses no electricity, no power other than natural light. They call these light bulbs appropriately a liter of light. At first, the liters of light would only be helpful during the daytime because the sunlight was there to activate them. But then the innovation began. Ilac Diaz, under the My Shelter Foundation, took these liters of light into the Philippines and added a single circuit with a 1-watt LED-powered light. The single watt light inside this liter bottle can light a 15-square-foot room. It charges with the sunlight, and then after the sun goes down, the room remains lit. My Shelter Foundation installed 200,000 of these liters of light within their first year. Alfredo Moser, the creator, says, "It's a divine light. God gave the sun to everyone. Light is for everyone." This is a renewable resource I actually learned about while helping out the 4th grade class over at Cedar Lane. My internship site for that past year provided many rich opportunities for learning, and these 4th graders taught me a lot. They were learning about recognizing their power and taught me about recognizing my power. We were watching this YouTube video on the liters of light, and we were all amazed at the impact that they had on this community. And we also realized it wasn't just a cool science project to try at home. They picked up very easily that these light bulbs were a means of survival. Much like the children at Cedar Lane, I'm guessing most children here at River Road have never had to know a life without electricity. This is a blessing and a privilege that we are tasked to hold with great responsibility. Joanna Macy, an environmental activist, author, and scholar of Buddhism, systems theory, and deep ecology, identified in her work a spiral that maps our journey into deeper connection with the earth. She describes it in 4 stages: coming from gratitude, honoring our pain for the world, seeing with new eyes, and going forth. These 4 stages support one another and work best when experienced in sequence. They help us experience firsthand that we are larger, stronger, and deeper, and more creative than we were brought up to believe. The spiral is fractal in nature, she writes. The sequence can repeat itself in ever new ways, and even with a particular stage of the spiral. The spiral can be discerned over the span of a lifetime or a project, or it can happen within a day or several times a day. We come back to it again and again as a source of strength and fresh perspective. If you remember, the spiral begins with gratitude, quieting our mind, bringing us back to the source, stimulating our empathy and confidence. It helps us to be more fully present and open space for acknowledging the pain we carry for the world. In that step 2 of owning and honoring our pain and daring to experience it, we learn the true meaning of compassion, to suffer with. We do not suffer alone, but together in the interdependent web of existence. And experiencing this reality of interexistence helps us to see with new eyes. And these new eyes, this new vision, that's more than our eyes, it's our mental and spiritual vision, allows us to get intimate with the circumstances and engage more effectively. Joanna Macy writes so beautifully about this stage of seeing with new eyes. We can taste our own power to change and feel the texture of our living connections with past and future generations, and with our sibling species. And then ever again, as part of the spiral, we are sent forth to go into the actions that call each of us according to our situation and our gifts and our limitations. With others whenever and wherever possible, we set a plan, set a target, and step out. We don't wait for a blueprint or a fail-proof scheme. For each step will be our teacher along the way, bringing new perspectives and opportunities. And even when we don't succeed in a given venture, we can be grateful for the chance we took and the lessons we learned, and that gratitude starts the spiral all over again. There are hard things to face in our world today if we want to be of use. Gratitude, when it's real, offers no blinders. On the contrary, in the face of devastation and tragedy, gratitude can ground us. Especially when we're scared, gratitude can hold us steady for the work that must be done. I close today with the classic words of Alice Walker. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. People think pleasing God is all God cares about. But any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. Looking outside this window, I can say I'm truly grateful for all the colors. I see you, God. Thank you. I see you, Mother Earth. Feel you beneath my feet. Thank you. I see you, creation. Thank you. May creation live in us, through us, because of us. Blessed be. May it be so. And amen.